All right, we're just going to get right into it. It's week 15 of the NFL season, and Clark's not here, so really not looking to fly solo tonight. So we're going to do probably an abbreviated show. Just going to go over some concepts this week and maybe look a little bit at the field. So last week, I was all over Trevor Lawrence. I said you had to play Trevor Lawrence. Nobody else was doing it. It made sense. And at the end of the day, it was the right call. So, props to anybody who did it, anybody who listened last week and took advantage of that. You probably cashed in some good money. I did as well. I got 15th place out of 197,000 people in the 50 cent GPP. It wasn't any real money. The 50 cent entry took home $200, which I'm looking. I want to win at least $10,000, which would have been first place, and that's what I was shooting for. But if you played that Lawrence stack like we talked about, I was feeling it. Like, that was the one thing I was like looking at, focused on, and feeling it, and it came true. And you're gonna listen to the show a lot of weeks, and you're gonna hear me say things that just aren't gonna happen. Because that's what it means to be contrarian. That's what it means playing against the field. Because most weeks you're wrong, but once or twice a year you can be right, and you should be right if you're playing right, if you're looking at the data properly. And those weeks when everybody else doesn't want to do it and you do it, that's when the opportunity comes. Because like this week, Patrick Mahomes is projecting at 21% ownership. Now, if you could figure out the jigsaw puzzle that is the Kansas City Chiefs going up against the Houston Texans, and you could get the right players, you can get the job done, because the pieces outside of Mahomes are so cheap. The wide receivers are nothing. The most expensive wide receiver in that game is Juju, and Juju is pull it up here. He's 5,800. So you can conceivably, instead of doing Juju, you could stack MBS with Kelsey and Mahomes. And yeah, Kelsey's really expensive, but he's 7,800. He's still cheaper than an elite wide receiver. And he does give you great ceiling. So you can get there with Mahomes, and you can figure out the jigsaw puzzle. But the problem being is, with 21% ownership, you have to be perfect. Everything has to be right. Whereas if you play a guy like last week with Trevor Lawrence, who had under 1% ownership, even if the other pieces aren't completely correct, you have enough advantage over the field, because everything else around it is sinking, for a guy like Trevor Lawrence to be the number one QB on the week. Hey, Rygar, that you just get a really good advantage. And that's when people are talking about being contrarian, and they talk about going against the field. And until you hit it, until you get it, it doesn't always make sense. And I thought that was a really good example of getting it, of understanding how it works when it works right. So looking at this week, you have the Saturday slate, which, the way I approach a 3-game slate is, I'll take usually the 4 best quarterback plays on the board. If I'm doing like 150 max or even a 20 max, I'm going to take the 4 best quarterback plays. Generally, the 2 chalkiest quarterback plays, the 2 highest owned quarterbacks that everybody thinks is the favorite. Usually that I'll go into the third on that. And then I look at the price points, and I try to balance the prices. So, looking at the slate, you have Josh Allen, obviously, huge ceiling. I'm going to want to play him. Kirk Cousins as a decent ceiling. And then every other quarterback has the exact same projection, give or take a point or two. So really, it just comes down to which one are you feeling makes the most sense. So you have Josh Allen at 8,300, definitely playing him. You have Kirk Cousins, who's the second highest ceiling. He's 6K. So now you have Deshaun Watson at 6,300. That doesn't feel right to me, because if I'm just looking to take some risk here, I already have one quarterback at 6K who I believe is actually really good, and that's Kirk Cousins. That I don't know if I really want to take the risk on Deshaun Watson, who's shown nothing going up against the Baltimore Ravens in a very uninspiring game. Or Tua is just in a really bad spot with the Miami Dolphins going up against Buffalo. I'm taking Josh Allen. Um, if I'm running 4 quarterbacks, I'm definitely going to play Tua. But if I'm playing 3, if I'm getting thin here, there's good reason to fade him because he's more money than Kirk Cousins is. So why split your opportunity and just go with the better play, which would be Cousins. Um, and then I try to find the cheapest quarterback as my 4th pick. And you have Tyler Huntley and you have Matt Ryan, and they're both the exact same price. There's $100 difference. Matt Ryan is $100 cheaper than Tyler Huntley. Tyler Huntley does have some running equity. Matt Ryan is completely dust, and Huntley's going up against Cleveland. I mean, I just think Huntley's the better play. So those would be my plays. I would grab the best Josh Allen, the second best Kirk Cousins, Tua because that game has the highest over and under, and then I would play Huntley because he just feels better than Matt Ryan, and I would fade Ryan, and I would fade Deshaun Watson, and I'm just looking for opportunity. The more things you could cut out of your lineups in a small slate, the better, because you do need to take opportunity at every chance you could get at any player that's projecting for about 10-point ceiling. Because, a guy who's like 3K, like a James Cook, he's 4,800. You're not going to want to play James Cook, but 4,800 and the dude goes off. Let's say he's the second best running back on the slate. And, it's not Jonathan Taylor. It's not his brother, Delvin Cook. It's James Cook. Suddenly, he's winning huge tournaments. So that's why you have to play a guy like James Cook. But again, anybody with the ceiling, Kareem Hunt, you're going to want him in your player pool. See some other thinner plays here. Yeah, that's about it. I usually like to run 6 running backs in a 3-person field. So, I mean, obviously just keep going from the ceiling down. So it's Taylor, it's Cook, it's Chubb, Mozart, Dobbins, and then James Cook is probably the cutoff. I would consider Devin Singletary. As a matter of fact, I think you have to consider Devin Singletary. He's got to be in your player pool. And then Kareem Hunt would be the other name, as mentioned, that I would consider. So I, I'm probably feeling pretty good about doing 6, but I would move it up to 8 if needed. And then when it comes to tight end, I just play the top 4 projecting ceiling tight ends, and I don't give a shit about the rest. And those, I mean, that's where you can lose. That's where I'm taking my biggest risk. That Isaiah Likely at 2,600, backing up Mark Andrews goes off. I mean, he is getting some targets, and let's just say he gets 2 touchdowns and 40 yards. Like he could break the slate, and I'm just not touching him because I just think the risk is too high. I would rather take the risk on the third receivers on teams that, like looking at the Indianapolis Colts. I'm going to play Alex Pierce. He projects for a ceiling of 10 points. He's 3,900. It's probably a shitty play, but it makes sense, especially cutting the tight ends out, where he could be one of the guy. One of these third wide receivers are going to be key, and it's a dart throw. You don't know for certain. And then teams where there's no third wide receiver with a good projection, with a good ceiling projection, and not a good ceiling projection. Like I said, I'm talking 10 points. That's what I'm looking for. It's not asking a lot, but a guy like KJ Osborne in Minnesota isn't projecting for 10 points. That's probably going to be a fade, But the good news is TJ Hawkinson is the tight end, and he's projected for 18 points, so he's going to be one of my top 4. He's going to be one of my 4 played tight ends, so it balances out. Most likely, if it's a bad third wide receiver, chances are it's a good tight end. You get that same situation with the Baltimore Ravens. Delvin Duvernay isn't even projecting for 10 points. Deshaun Jackson isn't projecting for 10 points. But Demarcus Robinson is the only wide receiver, and he's just projecting for 10 points only. Um, so, when I'm playing those Tyler Huntley stacks, man, I usually game stack like 4 to 5 players in these small field stuff and these 3 game slates. But yeah, that might actually talk me into Matt Ryan at the end of the day because it's pretty thin. But I probably would single stack Huntley with Andrews. I guess you're just gonna have to double stack it and you know hope Demarcus Robinson has a pulse, which probably isn't likely. Um, and man, I don't know. Isaiah Likely just keeps popping out, even though he projects for nothing. So that's something to think about there. And then Miami, there's no tight end worth playing. Your 3 wide receivers. I probably Trent Sherfield has been seeing a little bit more action lately. He also returns kicks. So I think I'm playing him, even though he's not projecting for 10 points. I think he's going to be one of the outliers that I'd allow there. And then, of course, the Buffalo Bills, you're going to have Isaiah McKenzie, um, Gabe Davis, and Stephon Diggs. And I wouldn't be shocked if Dawson Knox is one of the top 4 tight ends. Um, so, I mean, it's all in on Buffalo, but it starts getting expensive. So, I mean, you do have to play a guy. You do have to play the third wide receiver in order to make that stack work. So that's what I do, and then I just kind of auto gen. I really don't do hand builds on these small slates because it's just such a crapshoot. I generally don't like playing them at all, but I can't help it because I'm a gambler and I like opportunity, and it's hard to walk away from an opportunity. But when you really measure it out, the payouts on some of these tournaments, if you're playing a $3 20 max, I mean, you're talking $60, and when you generally play in the $3, 20 max, I think the top prize is 50K. It's either 50K or 100K. I mean, it's real. But on these smaller slates, the prizes aren't generally as good. I mean, it might be 5 grand. And at that point, I don't know if it's worth it that I'm risking my $60 on a very high risk game for a payout that I'm really not super excited about. Now, I think Thanksgiving had a higher payout because more people play it. So the Saturday slates may have a higher payout. I know I got excited after, like I really tweaked my rules and my modifiers and um, in my optimizer for the Thanksgiving slate, and I was feeling really good about it. I did a lot of research from the last 4 years of Thanksgiving slates, and it actually produced a little bit of profit. So I started thinking, well, why am I not targeting 3 game slates in general? So I started playing the afternoon only slates on DraftKings, and that's where the payouts aren't really good. And I started losing, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I taking this unnecessary risk? And last week I actually stopped playing them. So I'm iffy if I'm even going to spend time with the Saturday stuff. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of thoughts there for Saturday before we move into the main slate, the 10 game main slate for Sunday. Uh, I'm not as confident at the quarterback position this week as I was last week. I don't see the game stack like I did last week, where I just got so excited that like you checked every box with that Trevor Lawrence play. He was playing a terrible team. He was the chalk the week before and failed, so nobody wanted to play him. He had the injury tag. Like there just was a lot of reasoning to get excited. There is one guy this week that's really, really excited me, and I mean, we'll just get right to it. It's Mike White. It feels very much like the Trevor Lawrence play last week, where you have access to a lot of the ceiling on the slate by playing Mike White. The guy balls. Um, he's had good games, and who's he playing? He's playing the Detroit Lions, who we know are one of the worst defenses in the league. So the opportunity makes a lot of sense there. Now, Mike White has thrown, against the Chicago Bears, which was, just a shitty game. He threw the ball 28 times. Against the Vikings, he threw the ball 57 times. against the Buffalo Bills, a dominant defense. He threw the ball 44 times. Now, he got 27 DraftKings points out of Chicago. He got 22 against the Minnesota Vikings. He hasn't had that 30-point week, but he's going up against the damn Detroit Lions, who are absolutely terrible. So you have a really good game environment where not only does it make sense to play the guy, but he's not gaining ownership right now. His ownership did spike a little bit. He's up to 6.5% ownership. So I mean, you're not being insanely sneaky, but you're not in that 20% that's playing Patrick Mahomes. You're playing a dude that you're gonna be able to do a lot with because, again, it's not just Mike White. Mike White gives you access. There's like, of the top 10 wide receivers, two of them are in this game, and you're going to have easy access to it. And that's Garrett Wilson. He's 6K. You're stacking him with Mike White, who's, 5'4". And then you're going to run it back probably with Armand St. Brown, who is a little pricey. He's 7,800, but we know his ceiling is legit. So I think he's a top 5 wide receiver this week in projections. So you're getting an elite wide receiver. You're getting a up and coming popular Garrett Wilson, and the reason he's popular is because he's playing so damn good, because the opportunity is there, because they're throwing the ball so much from Mike White. So like all the pieces just kind of connect. And yeah, Garrett Wilson is chalky. He's 20%. Armand St. Brown, his ownership's finally kind of settling down a little bit because he hasn't been producing as well, and he's at 15%. So it is going to take a third piece in your Mike White stack to kind of get a little contrarian. Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims, they're both projecting over 10 points for a ceiling. Again, that's kind of my threshold. When I look at a player like Braxton Berrios, he's 3K. His ceiling is projected at 6 points. I'm just not interested. Like I'm not even gonna. I just cut him. It's not even worth considering. But Elijah Moore and Denzel Mims, they're both under 4K. 36 on Elijah Moore, 3K the bare minimum on Mims, and right now Moore is projecting at almost 10% ownership. So clearly the double stack everyone is playing is going to be Moore Wilson. Mims, like, from a projection standpoint, is a really good play here. 5 targets last week. He caught 3 of them, went 35 yards. That's against the Buffalo Bills. Now he's going up against Detroit. And if they throw the ball 40 to 50 times, which is what's going to have to happen for Mike White to be the best player on the field, or at least, if he comes in top 4 at wide receiver at quarterback at that price point, you're in really good shape. So I think Denzel Mims might be like the hidden piece to this stack, which is, last I checked projections, Mike White was projecting under 5% ownership. He was at about 3%. Now he's at 6.5. So this time the field's coming around to it. People are figuring it out that he's one of the best plays on this slate. And but it's not gonna get crazy. I don't think it gets up to 10% ownership. But if you play Mims, you're really differentiating yourself from the rest of the people. That 6.5% that's playing Mike White. And if that one thing goes right, you're probably now in the top 10 percentile of people playing Mike White. It might even be higher than that. So that's just a good play. You can look at the tight end situation for the Jets. Let's just pull up Tyler Conklin. He's actually a great play. 3,100, projecting at 5% ownership, ceiling above 10 points. As a matter of fact, he's highlighted as one of my best tight end plays on the week. The optimizer and the model, he's like popping in it. So, Tyler Conklin, I'm gonna be firing him up. I'm gonna be playing him a lot more than Mims, and I'm probably gonna have to fade Elijah Moore, even though he makes a lot of sense. But the 10% ownership with the 20% ownership of Garrett Wilson, and then the 15% ownership of St. Brown, like you have to find a way to get away from one of those pieces. And I think just fading Elijah Moore is the right thing to do from a tournament standpoint. Unless you want to like fade Armand St. Brown, for like, I mean, that's where it gets tough. I mean, you can do DJ Shark, like you're just losing the ceiling in that game. That's really key to winning the tournament. You can easily go down to DeAndre Swift at 5,700 and assume Detroit on the road. Um, takes the lead and they just grind the ball with Swift and Williams. And, Swift breaks, a 60-yard run, gets a touchdown, catches a couple balls, and, you're in the money and they don't really uh, use St. Brown because they're winning. They're not taking the risk of throwing the ball. Suddenly now it's making sense and you're being contrarian. So I do think Swift is a play is smart. If you want to play Elijah Moore, um, maybe then you play Swift as the bring back, and you know see how that works for you. But yeah, I mean this is the game I'm most excited about. Jets Lions. It's sickening. It's disgusting. Like these are the games that us degenerate tournament players have to get excited about. But man, that's what wins you. That's what wins you the big money. It's being the contrarian. It's spending down at quarterback. Um, because most of the time, Patrick Mahomes kind of an exception because nobody knows who the wide receiver one is going to be. No one knows where the ball is going to go outside of Kelsey. And if you play Kelsey, it starts getting expensive. But when you start looking at the other quarterbacks, your Josh Allen's, um, it starts getting really cost prohibitive when you start putting the stacks together because he's good. His players are good. The prices are just skyrocket. Where these shittier games, you run into situations where you know uh, there's opportunity. Now, Sauce Gardner is going to be trouble for Armand St. Brown. Um, but the Vikings did put up 32 DraftKings points against the secondary of the Jets. Um, that's really the only time this year, um, outside of some earlier stuff in the season. Green Bay and Miami put up 27 points. But outside of that, I mean, this secondary has held everybody to under 24 points. And that's a little concerning that the game could be slowed down a little bit. But if yeah, yeah, that makes the Armand St. Brown scary. So the Jets are favored in this game. Their home team. It's a slight advantage. But if the Detroit Lions can, man, if they could get an early lead and then just grind the ball with Swift and Williams, um, the stack will work. But there's some concerns. Last week there was like the vision was very clear. This week, not so much because the run back is just difficult in this game. I'm very confident in the Jets' offense against the Detroit Lions defense, and I'm very confident that they're going to throw the ball a lot. And I think Mike White is a great play. I'm just a little concerned on what to do on the Detroit side going up against the Jets secondary. So, but it is my favorite game on the slate. Looking at some other of the games like Justin Fields, Philadelphia. You know, Jalen Hurts, I like, you can get a lot of points. You could get to your ceiling by playing, bully ball, where you take a team that's just going to beat the shit out of the other team to the point where you're almost nervous that like they're just going to dominate so much they're going to pull their starters. Um, you have that situation with Philadelphia against Chicago, and you definitely have that situation with Kansas City versus the Houston Texans. But those games do produce a lot of points. Um, and your studs, even if if Mahomes puts up so many points he's pulled in the fourth quarter, chances are he's already got 30 DraftKings points, and you're probably in pretty good shape. So they're definitely worth doing. I don't like attacking these games because the pieces are just so damn expensive. Jalen Hurts is 8,200. I really do like Miles Sanders. I loved him last week. He did me well last week. He's again projecting under 10% ownership, and he has just like a really good, sexy ceiling going up against the Chicago Bears, which have absolutely no ability to stop the run. So Miles Sanders, just a great play this week. He's my favorite piece in this game. But AJ Brown, I mean, just an easy spot for him. He very likely to get a touchdown. Devontae Smith, little concerned with there's I think Dallas Goedert might be coming back, and games with Goddard, Smith loses a couple passes. He loses a couple opportunity. Um, that's realistic. So that makes me a little concerned with Devontae Smith. I'm not 100% sure that Goddard is playing, so that's something to monitor. But Devontae Smith being wide receiver 2, he's 6,400. And I don't know that I want to get down to the 3,600 Quez Watkins. So it just becomes really hard to play this game. The run back, you could easily run it back with David Montgomery, who projects well. You can run on Philly. You just, it's hard to pass on them. But the pass rush of the Philadelphia Eagles against, the offensive line, which actually just broke the top 10, an offensive line. So the Bears' offensive line has improved drastically. But the Philadelphia Eagles, man, they're going to come to feast on that Bears offense. And I think they're going to get there. And it's going to be ugly. The Bears are going to have no time to throw the ball. The Philadelphia Eagles are excellent against the pass, and the Chicago Bears have 0 players to pass to. So, I mean, Claypool's done nothing. The only guy that interests me at all is Komet. So there's just not anything really in this game that's worth getting excited about. So that game's kind of a fade. I wish Clark was here to talk some weather because I know there is some snow projections um, on the slate. I should just pull up the weather. Let's see what we're looking at here. I use NFLweather.com. It's a great site. It breaks down, gives you the weather, all the weather reports you need, the wind speed, the temperature, if it's in a dome or not. And just kind of taking a quick glance here. I don't see any heavy winds. It's obviously going to be cold in Chicago, 21 degrees, 35 degrees clear. Detroit versus the Jets. New England Raiders are in the dome. Tennessee Chargers are in the dome. Yeah, let's get to that game because that's the game I'm. Before I sold myself on Mike White being like a great contrarian play, I was really high on the Tennessee Chargers game. One of the key factors last week with Trevor Lawrence is it's just so easy to pass on the Tennessee Titans. They have nothing going on. And the prices of the Los Angeles Chargers pass catchers have gone down drastically. Mike Williams is 6,300. Keenan Allen is 6,800. I mean, you can double stack it. Justin Herbert, a little expensive, 7,200, but he's still $1,000 under, Mahomes. Yeah, I mean, he's $900 less than the top price guys. He's right there in the Joe Burrow range. Joe Burrow at 7K. I definitely like uh, Justin Herbert over Joe Burrow, as does the field here. Now, Justin Herbert is going to be catching a little chalk. He's about 10%, which is really kind of the average. That's for a good play. That's the average. I think 15 is high chalk, and then anything over 15 is just ridiculous chalk. Which right now, again, Mahomes. They brought Mahomes projections down. Okay, he was at 20%, which is I didn't understand why because again the pieces just didn't make sense. But yeah, that's brought down. Jalen Hurts now projected to be the highest owned quarterback on the slate at 14%. Um, and there's a lot of reasons again to love that play going up against a helpless Bears defense, but it's expensive and it's just hard to make work. And I don't know that there's a lot of ceiling in that game. So a lot of reasons to fade Jalen Hurts. Good cash game play though. Um, Dak Prescott 6,200. The field's moving towards him. He's at about 10% ownership going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The over and under is good on that game. People are definitely gonna be looking at it. It's at 48. The top over and under on the week is, let's see here. Yeah, I mean it's what, 48 and a half, 49 and a half, the Houston Texans and Kansas City Chiefs. So this is the week. That's another reason why Mike White makes sense. There's just not a lot of ceiling in these games. There's just not a lot of like expectation for high potent offense across the board. Those are the weeks where you have to worry about the big stars. When there's not a lot of that going on, there's just like ugly matchups, blowouts, and just Kansas City's 14-point favorite, Philadelphia's 9-point favorite. Like the competitive games are the fun ones. A game like Pittsburgh, Carolina, which I'm not touching and I'm not advocating for. It's has one of the lowest over unders on the week at 37 and a half. But those are the games you just have to like look at and talk yourself out of. I could instantly do that by looking at the over and under going, it's 37 and a half. It's not worth considering. But those are the games, those middle like over unders, those 44 and a halves are the games worth looking at. The New England Patriots versus the Oakland Raiders, or I'm sorry, the Las Vegas Raiders. Jacksonville, Dallas. That game is obviously very chalky. Yeah, I have no interest in the New Orleans game, the New Orleans Falcons game. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place this morning. I got no sleep, and um, yeah, I was hoping I'd have a partner here this morning to kind of help me stay focused, but that didn't happen. So I'm all over the place. Yeah, the Falcons New Orleans Saints. It's projected to be a slow paced game. Um, I do like Andy Dalton. I really do. I mean, I keep trying to be sneaky and finding the guy, but when you're talking Andy Dalton versus Mike White, I just think the game environment is so much better for Mike White, and that's what again going back to the point of being contrarian. Mike White is slightly going to be under owned compared to Andy Dalton. 6.5% versus 7.5%. It's a 1 point difference, but it just goes to show you like people don't want to do the Mike White play, but yet there's so much damn ceiling there that it's probably a great play. And, Mike White is $200 more than Andy Dalton, and you're getting a lot more ceiling projection from him. So it's just a much better play. So when I look at Andy Dalton, as excited as I get for him, at the end of the day, I'd rather just put that money towards Mike White and fade Andy Dalton. That and I'm not like super excited about the pass catchers. Chris Olive is 6,500, which is a great price. I mean, we've seen what he could do. The opportunity is still there, but I think I like him as a piece rather than as part of a stack. So I mean, he's a guy I'm going to be playing a lot outside of this game. Um, Everything also feels right about Elvin Kamara this week as well. Uh, he's it's not sneaky. I mean, 20% of the field is going to be there, but he's 6,800. He's probably $400 too cheap than where he should be. I know he hasn't been producing a lot, but he's been injured. They're coming off a bye. They're going up against Atlanta, which I think is the sixth worst team against stopping the run. And Andy Dalton's going to get him involved in the pass game. Like it just seems like the right play. You know, I mean, he's been terrible this year. Last 5 weeks, 5 points, 9 points, 12 points, 7 points, 9 points. Just ugly. But against the Raiders, he did put up 42 points earlier this year. Um, he has put up 27 points. So the ceiling is there. I think this is just a get right Elvin Kamara spot. Give a little bit of love to the people who drafted him, who somehow, despite him, made the playoffs in their season long. I think he might deliver for them this week, which makes him a pretty good, fantasy play. As far as the Falcons go, there's really nothing that excites me. Um, I think the wide receiver, Patton at running back, you can run on New Orleans, but it's just a split duty. I'm just not loving it. Drake London is a pretty good play at 4,700. I think if you're looking for cheap wide receivers, he's a pretty good spot there. We talked Chiefs Houston. Um, it's just not a great game environment. Uh, and because you just can't figure out the Kansas City Chiefs. It's just an enigma that you just end up like being frustrated. You start building so many teams that like they're so different. Like I love when I could game stack and there's like one or two pieces I change up, you know, to give a little bit of flexibility to. But when it's like every player I'm considering starting, and every player I fade, I feel bad about. I feel concerned. Like I don't think I want to play any Justin Watson, but Justin Watson could be like the key piece to this. And if I put 20% equity, let's say I do, I run 5 quarterback stacks at 20% each. Like I'm gonna feel pretty shitty that I ran 20% of Patrick Mahomes for Justin Watson to go for like 2 touchdowns and 80 yards. Like that would just destroy me. I'm a fragile man, and these are hard times. And it's Merle Haggard had a song, "If we make it through December." Um, that's how I feel. Like I can't do it, man. I can't put myself out there. I'm too fragile of a man to play the Kansas City stuff. Like it's just so much could go right, so much could go wrong. Like it's just a damn enigma, man. And I'm not going to do it. I will say I like Chris Moore, 4,200 for the Houston Texans. They have like nobody, and it's Chris Moore and Philip Dorsett are the wide receivers. And Philip Dorsett, I think, is worth playing. 3,300. If you're looking for a punt wide receiver, if you're looking for a guy just to give you a shot at 10 to 12 points, Chris Moore, I think he gets you 15 points. Uh, they're worth playing. Pittsburgh, Carolina, we could just kind of skip that. We kind of have already. Um, we talked Detroit Jets. The Jaguars Dallas game is intriguing. Um, Definitely worth playing. I just feel like every time I play Dallas, I lose. It just never happens for me, and I feel like I've lost more money on Dak Prescott than any quarterback, in the history of the NFL. Um, he always has a great ceiling. He always projects really well. I mean, if you're a data person, like it always makes sense, but I mean, last 5 games, 15 points, 17 points, 16 points, 20 points, 21 points, 26 points, 12 points. I mean, what's the ceiling? Like, why do we keep playing Dak Prescott at 6,200? It's not like he's cheap. If he was 5,400, I mean, if he was one of the cheap quarterbacks, it's like, okay, yeah, but 10% ownership, middle price quarterback that never does anything. Like it's just so frustrating playing Dak Prescott. Um, and then you get to the running back situation, and the good news is both of the running backs are like not owned this week. So, if you could stomach spending 7,100 for Tony Pollard in a split back in a running back by committee situation, I mean, both those guys dominate. So, I mean, it's okay, but there's not a great ceiling on either player. And Yeah, because they're just splitting time. They're just splitting time. Um, Zeke 6,200, Pollard is 7,100. But again, they're both uh, under or at right about 5% ownership. So you really get an advantage on the field if you were to play, Tony Pollard and he were to go off, and you would get an insane advantage if you played Zeke Elliott and he put up 30 points. So tournaments, I mean, you do have to consider those guys. And then the wide receivers. I mean, it's CeeDee Lamb. He much like Prescott. I feel like I always get burned on him. Like it just never happens. He does okay. Like he's not a bust. 8 points, 20 points, 20 points, 9 points, 41 points, 18 points, 10 points. It's just like there's no consistency. The opportunity is there every week. He gets those 5 targets. The week he went up for 41 points was against Green Bay. He got 11 targets that week. I'm sorry, he got 15 targets and 11 catches. Yeah, so I mean, CeeDee Lamb's obviously the play in the game stack with Dak, and then Gallup or Noah Brown are worth considering, and then Dalton Schultz is always makes sense. Great tight end play. Good tight end going up against Jacksonville, which isn't great against the tight end position. The problem is, Dalton Schultz has 15% ownership, which is just way too high for the tight end position. Tight ends you want under 10% ownership. Anything over 10% in tournament play at tight end really needs to be part of a game stack, which it would be in this case. But outside of that, it starts becoming fade territory. There's just so much volatility at tight end that and he's not free. He's not 3K. He's 44. I could get down to probably 33 and have just as much of a chance as getting close to what Dalton Schultz puts up. So easy fade in tournaments, but in game stacks, I think he makes sense with Prescott and Lamb. Um, Michael Gallup has no projected ownership, same price, virtually the same price as Dalton Schultz. He's $100 more, and he's a wide receiver. Where the other guy's a tight end, and he can be that guy. I mean, he can be the Michael Gallup of old that we knew and loved. It just hasn't happened for him this year. He did put up 18 points against the Colts 2 weeks ago, but that was his best game of the year. So yeah, I mean, you can look at Michael Gallup there. I think I actually like that play. I like the Schultz Lamb stack. Fading on the tight end Schultz because everyone's there, and running it back with Kirk. I mean, Kirk's been on a tear. Evan Ingram, man, went off last week. I mean, that was the key. That was the key to the game stack with Lawrence. He absolutely broke the slate, and for as sure as I was with Lawrence, I did not foresee uh, Evan Ingram putting up 42 points. Like that just was not on my radar. Thankfully again I was there. He was one of the plays within the game stack. You need to start two. It was him, Kurt, and Zay Jones were the plays. I like Trevor Lawrence again this week. The Dallas Cowboys defense has been really good against the pass. They do a lot right when it comes to the things that are. Oh wow, yeah, I'm wrong. Dallas gives up a lot of points to the wide receiver position. They shut down the tight end position, and they shut down the run game. And quarterbacks don't project well for them, but they average probably about 15 points a game would be the average. Um, Running backs probably average around 15 points, and then wide receivers average around 30 points. So yeah, I mean that makes me excited. I mean I think it's gonna be a lot of Mike White this week with Trevor Lawrence. Go back to the well. Same situation as last week. He's under 5% owned. He's at 3% ownership. He broke the slate last week. Um, the difference this week, and the reason nobody is going to him, is the price has gone up $300. Now he's in the 6K range. He's 6K. Um, it's just so much easier to stomach when a guy is in the fives. Like you just as soon as they hit that six number, it just becomes a new tier, and you just start like comparing prices. Like, Dak Prescott 6,200. Again, I like Trevor Lawrence better though. Um, yeah, let's see. Jared Goff is 57. So yeah, I mean, like I'm not that concerned with his price point. Um, it's $600 difference off of Mike White. Um, yeah, I mean, fuck it, go for it. 48 point over and under. You have an easy, you have Christian Kirk, and then you have Zay Jones or Evan Ingram. This week, a lot tougher of a matchup for the tight end position. So I think Zay Jones and Christian Kirk makes sense. And then you run it back with CeeDee Lamb, and then you don't even have to worry about Dak Prescott disappointing you, um, or taking the risk on Gallup, unless you want to put Gallup as the run back, which seems very thin. You have a nice you have a 17 you have a 20-point projected ceiling for Kirk. You have a 17 projected ceiling for Zay Jones, and you have a 23 projected ceiling for CeeDee Lamb. So all the pieces make sense. It's a lot like last week, where I mean Trevor Lawrence is going to be a good play, and I think I'm going to put him in my single entry. Last week, I talked a big game and I ran him big in tournaments, and it worked well for me. But after I finished the show, I started doing breakdown on price point, and at the end of the day, I thought Geno Smith made the most sense for the pieces. Like you got like a lot of good players in that game stack, and Geno Smith projected really well. That in my single entry, I ended up doing, my hand build was a Geno Smith team instead of the Trevor Lawrence team, which was just a big mistake. And then in the 20 max, I didn't allow double tight end plays, and the Trevor Lawrence play needed the double tight end plays really to maximize it, which is why it worked for me in the 150 max, because I did allow for double tight end in that scenario. So that was my mistake. Um, I got to look over the tight end board this week and kind of see where I'm going there. But yeah, so great game. Like 48 point over and under. It's like the second highest on the board. Chicago, it's third highest. Chicago is the second highest, but that doesn't feel right. I would take the under on that game. And then the Kansas City Houston game we talked about. I mean, it's a beat up game. Where this game there's a 4 point difference between the two teams. Um, it's projected by Vegas to be competitive, and it has a high over and under. It has a quarterback who's on fire right now. He has chemistry with his receivers, and you have a really good run back. So go for it. I mean, fire this one up. So right now, my two quarterbacks are White and Trevor Lawrence. And then I'm probably going to do a little. I'm going to try to maybe. Oh, Herbert would be the third one. Um, and then you get Mac Jones and the Raiders game. This game is interesting. Mac Jones is projecting for a little bit of ownership. He's about 5%. Derek Carr is at under 5%. Um, Derek Carr has one of the higher ceilings on the slate. The dude just never gets there. He's 5,600 though. So he's the same price as Mike White. Um, but we've seen him hit his ceiling, in years past. He has not done it this year though. His highest ceiling game has been 23 points. So just disappointing over and over. And I know I've put some money on him. And I stopped like by week 4. I was just like, I just don't feel it. Let him burn me, and then maybe I'll reconsider. And he never did. So he's just been off my radar. This game projects to be a very slow paced game. The Patriots love running slow games. They're like the Green Bay Packers in that aspect. So there's not a lot of speed. from tempo, so you're not going to have as many fantasy plays, which to me is generally just a fade, um, unless I believe in the quarterback, and I don't know that I believe in Mac Jones. When you're spending down at the quarterback, unless they're like Justin Fields when he was cheap, you knew he could get there with his legs, but when you get these guys, man, they got to be throwing for 40 balls. They got to have 40 attempts, and Mac Jones is not being underused. I mean, he's almost gotten there 3 weeks ago against Minnesota. He threw 39 times against Buffalo, a tremendous defense. He threw the ball 36 times. And then last week versus Arizona, in a game they dominated, 35 times. So they are throwing the ball. So Mac Jones is worth considering against Vegas. Um, but the game environment is really ugly. It really is. It does give you access to Devontae Adams as the run back. Because again, I don't think I'm going to the car side. Or if you think that Vegas takes the lead, I think Josh Jacobs is a good run back. I generally don't like running back with running. I generally don't like using a running back as the run back, but when it makes sense, I'm all for it. Now, Josh Jacobs is catching a lot of ownership at 24%, but I think if you're playing the Mac Jones double stack, I think you're going to be okay. Like, Devontae Adams 10%. Um, yeah, it's just like who do you play? That's where it starts getting tough with Mac Jones. Is with Trevor Lawrence and Mike White, there's receivers with high ceilings. There's guys that I trust and want to play. I want to play Garrett Wilson. I want to play Christian Kirk. Uh, I don't want to play Zay Jones, but he's there. When it comes to Mac Jones, I'm not sure if Jacoby Myers is playing. I know he's questionable. Devontae Parker questionable. Uh, are you really going to put a lot of equity in Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, or Thornton? Like the highest ceiling projection right now is Jacoby Myers at 13 points. Now, if Jacoby Myers was healthy, I'd be comfortable with it because I do think he's generally a pretty good wide receiver for his price point. Like he's not like good. Like he's not going to win. He's not going to be in the top 10 wide receivers, but he's so cheap. He's in the 4K range that if he gives you 20 points, which I think is realistic, that's fine. Hunter Henry is probably the best play. So maybe Mac Jones, Hunter Henry, and then just guess at wide receiver. And then just be excited you're playing Devontae Adams on the other side or Josh Jacobs. Yeah. It just that's my problem with this game. It's not so much the quarterback or the opportunity because I like a lot of what's happening here. But Mac Jones, again, he's projecting the same as Mike White and Trevor Lawrence. So, if I had my pick, I'd easily cancel him out. And spend up 1,000. The difference is $1,000 for Trevor Lawrence, um, or $400 for Mike White. But yeah, those guys are just better plays that I can't get on board with the Mac Jones hype this week, even though he's getting played up to 7%, which is not usual for him. Arizona, Denver, 37-point over and under. I'm just not excited for anything in this game. You have Brett Rippon versus Colt McCoy. I mean, how dusty can that be? Both quarterbacks are the stone minimum. They're 5K. Um, if you think somehow this is a magical shootout, I won $15,000 by playing a Drew Lock stack against Atlanta. In a game similar to this, where it just was ugly and nobody wanted to be on it. It did have a higher over under, if I remember right. It was like projecting like the fourth highest over under of the week. Where this just, Vegas says this is going to be a dud. I think it's going to be a dud. So it's probably not worth doing anything but maybe finding a couple pieces. Your Jerry Judy's, your DeAndre Hopkins projects well. But both those guys I think are a little too expensive. for the risk. 7,700 for Hopkins. I don't know if I want to spend almost 8K, for a guy who's being thrown to by a guy I know nothing about. So yeah, I mean I think this game's just like a total fade. Greg Dulcich is always a play at 3,600 and 5% ownership for Denver, but outside of that, I think I'm going to be fading pretty heavy. And then I'm saving the Chargers Tennessee for last because I really do like that game. We talked a little bit about it, so let me just skip over to 44 and a half over under Cincinnati, Tampa Bay. Mike White feels a lot like Matt Ryan, where it's just, every week there's hope and potential. And every week, it's 18 points, 15 points, 12 points, 17 points, 20 points. One time this year, he's gone over 25. Against the Chiefs, he put up 29 points. That was early in the season. This is an old dude, older than me. And I would be done by week 3. So, and I'm not, and I'm talking about playing fantasy football. Like by week 3, I'm exhausted, and I'm done with the game. Like I want the season to end. So to actually go out on a field, like it's crazy, man. It's crazy that the guy's still playing. Unbelievable. Um, I mean, the thing is, like 55 attempts, 54 attempts, 43 attempts. The last 3 weeks, like they're just not shy in throwing the ball. It's just, but they're just not getting there. So he's always worth a dart throw. Right now, there's virtually no ownership projected on Tom Brady. He's 5,500. So I mean, if you like, I'm putting everybody up against Mike White this week, and I think I do like Tom Brady over Mike White, but let's see who will we stack with. I mean, you got Jamar Chase as the clear run back, or you got T Higgins, who everyone is down on, and ownership reflects that. He's had a couple duds. He's hurt people in the season long. That people are just upset and angry and don't want to play the guy. That's tournament gold when that happens. Um, Godwin 6,700, Mike Evans 6,200, both in really good spots. Both have really high ceilings. Like, yeah, this is a game you got to play. You got to have exposure on Tom Brady, and I think you got to have exposure on Joe Burrow as well. Either way you go, the only expensive piece is Jamar Chase at 8,300. So you're gonna be able to do whatever you want, and there's a lot of players worth playing. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. I'm fine playing Tyler Boyd. I don't know how I feel about Julio Jones. I think that's a fade. Russell Gage, that's a fade. Just not enough ceiling. Um, I'm not really interested in any of the tight ends. So, yeah, I mean, the running backs are great too. Joe Mixon, 7,200. I think he's too cheap, but going up against Tampa Bay's defense, that's probably a smart fade. That's why no one's there. And then White or Fournette, two backs split in time. I don't know what's going on. I don't want any part of that. So I mean, there's a lot. There's 44 and a half points. Again, this is a tournament play that's worth taking. Yeah, I mean, Joe Burrow is projecting at 5% ownership. That's the dude. Like when you get him at 5% ownership, that's when he goes off. No one plays him, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he puts up 52 points. And Tyler Boyd somehow puts up 30, and T. Higgins gets it. I always forget who Boyd correlates with. That's funny to me because it's not both of the wide receivers. There's definitely what is it? So Tyler Boyd has good correlation with Jamar Chase and terrible correlation with T. Higgins. So I mean, if you're looking at things from a data and a correlation standpoint, kind of interesting that if you're going to play Boyd, play Chase. Because when T. Higgins has a good day, Chase doesn't. When T. Higgins has a good day, the tight end and the running back generally have good days. So if you think there's going to be a game where they're going to control the ground, which is unlikely against Tampa Bay, then Higgins is the go-to guy. But if you think it's going to be a lot of air and air yards, then it's Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd. And I think that's the way to go this week. That's the way I'm going to be playing it. Just stacking those guys. I might not even try to mix it up. I might just say fuck it. Let me play Jamar Chase. Let me play Tyler Boyd, and then I'm gonna get creative on the comebacks. I'll switch out Godwin. I'll switch out Evans. Um, maybe even a running back. But yeah. All right, so that's worth playing. And then the last game, Tennessee and the Chargers. Again, everything makes sense to throw on the Tennessee Titans. So I think Herbert's just in a great spot. I think the pass catchers for the Chargers are in a great spot. As thin as Josh Palmer at 5,600, I think he's playable. The run back is probably Robert Woods. If you think that Tennessee could get there controlling the game through the ground, then obviously Derrick Henry. But Derrick Henry a little expensive at 8K. Probably not worth the risk. He also was catching a lot of ownership this week. So I'm thinking I'm probably going to fade him as a run back and just go cheap and go Bob Woods. Old Robert Trees at 4,400, I think is a pretty good play. And then the tight end, the guy I can't pronounce his name, Oko. He got there last week. We talked a lot about him last week, and I said he'd be a good run back against Trevor Lawrence, and I was right. Like if you ran back him and you double stacked it with Evans, whoa baby, you're close to the $1 billion. That was a key piece there. So yeah, I mean he's worth a run back as well. Gerald Everett. We saw what Ingram did last week. What Lawrence and Ingram did last week against this Titans team. Let's go Gerald Everett, and let's go with his number one receiver. Let's go Keenan Allen. I mean, it's very affordable. It's very easy to get to, and then run it back with Bob Woods. I'm in. I'm excited. That's there's like 3 games I'm excited about, and that's one of them. So there you have it. I mean, I think that's everything. The chalk running backs. Just kind of look at those, see what's going on there. Yeah, Josh Jacobs is the highest projected owned running back right now. He's 8,100. A little expensive, little too much. Little expensive, little too much. Out of the night, 5,300. He's going to be chalk because of his price point. Out of the night. All right, thank you for coming now, but now I'm getting feedback, so I'm just, trying to wrap up here.
I turned it off.
All right, thank you. Good morning. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, let me look at tight end a little bit too, because right now the high O Stone projected player is the guy I was just talking about, the Chigozomo Okawako of the Tennessee Titans. We just call him Oko, Co. I like him a lot in that game stack, but at 18% ownership, I'm going to fade him in tournament play outside of the game stack. We talked a little bit about Schultz, same situation. I'm going to fade him. He's at 15%. Kelsey's at 15%. I know I'm never going to get to 15% on a 7,800 tight end. I'm probably going to have him around 5%. So that's not even a concern to me. Yeah, but tight end is pretty unimpressive this week. There's not a lot of great ceiling. So kind of do whatever you want, which usually means just spend as cheap as you can, which is why Co is so damn highly owned. He's the cheapest play with the highest ceiling. Great pivot off of him is Hunter Henry. Exact same projection. $200 more than Co. But you're losing, 12% ownership. Let's see. Yeah. Austin Hooper, Jordan Akins. Jordan Akins, 2,700. He's $300 less than, or $400 less than the chalk player. Again, projects exactly the same. I mean, it's the same story with all these guys. It's a touchdown or bust. So why take the risk that everyone else is doing? Go ahead and take the risk of, being contrarian to the field and being different and giving yourself an advantage instead of falling and failing with everybody else. That's what kills you. So, won't really talk wide receiver much. I mean, wide receivers always like the good plays are the good plays, the bad plays are the bad plays. There's not a huge wide receiver ceiling this week, too. That's something to consider. There's only like 5 guys. That's why, like Garrett Wilson, he's the 4th highest projecting wide receiver on the slate. I mean, Garrett Wilson. Armand St. Brown's the 2nd highest. So again, we're talking about Detroit and we're talking about the Jets. All signs keep pointing back. 2 of the top 5 projected ceiling players are in one game, and it's not being super owned. So, people are playing those guys outside of the stacks, but they're not playing them within the stack. So, good discipline, get there. And Christian Kirk is a top 10 wide receiver this week as well. So, fire up those Jets Detroit game and, have exposure to the Cincinnati Tampa game, have exposure on the Chargers Tennessee, and let's go back to Trevor Lawrence against Dallas. And those would be my plays this week. So hope everybody does well. Go win the money. I almost got there last week, close. I got into the 1 percentile of players, but it wasn't enough to make a lot of good money. So hopefully this is the big money. I need a car. I need a car bad. So I really kind of needed that first place finish. But, I'll take 16th place. This week, I'm going for the first. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Or a good day. Whatever the hell you're doing. I don't know. Drive safe.